Krystal is ready for the show. Krystal Thomas is here. So Krystal Thomas integrates for 20+ years of sales, coaching, leadership, and facilitation experience to create practical and diverse offerings. Her experience in managing a team of recruiters and speaking to hundreds of businesses about workforce, HR, and hiring brings a unique, well-rounded perspective to any group or business. In addition to managing and mentoring her team, Krystal is also a trained facilitator in communicating conflict resolution, infinite possibilities, the art of creating your dreams with Mike Dooley, and the 6 types of working genius with Patrick Lencioni. Krystal is passionate about training people to develop the skills that make them successful. In 2021, Krystal started Workforce Ready, an initiative to upskill those aging out of foster care system and those at risk of homelessness, utilizing skills in trauma, informed care, and fluid onboarding systems to give them the skills they need to succeed in the workforce. With that, go ahead, Krystal. Thank you for being here.
Stand up, like, can you guys see me? Okay, I'll let you move it around. I'll get that out of the way. Well, hello, that was a long bio. I don't know who wrote that. Must have been me. It always seems shorter when you send it out, and then you have to listen to your own accomplishment. I own Express Employment Professionals just down the hill for 9 years, coming up this June. So been in recruiting, and I know you guys all have the staffing woes of the mechanical universe, and you're not alone. I beat myself up just about every day thinking, why did I buy the one business? There's one complaint every business owner has, it's employees. And I bought an entire business wrapped around the #1 complaint of every employer. So I'm either brilliant or really, really stupid. The jury's out. I have my cards here, so if anyone wants one of those, you can grab those. And I'll pass these around each way, and that's for you guys. This handout, it's mostly just for visual, if you can't see the screen as well, when we get down to the charts. And you can throw some notes on there, but not necessary to keep notes. I did send over to Brenda my PowerPoint here, so if you can share that out with you guys. They're recording it as well. That's super duper.
That's it. What you sent me, Brenda shared it. Everybody should have their inbox as well.
Perfect. Because these 2 templates you'll get and use as you're coaching your team and working through things with your team. So you'll want lots of those printed out in the desk drawer. So accountability, I don't teach this because I'm a master at holding my employees accountable. I have pretty much found every way to not hold people accountable, so I'm sharing those with you guys. And what I've learned is I go to every class that I can find on accountability. Every time it's offered up as an offering, people are like, yes, oh my gosh, we need more help holding people accountable. And it is the #1 topic at every place I speak at, #1 topic. So much so that I'm tired of hearing about it and talking about it. You guys too, probably, right? So what gets in our way, and why is this a topic? Nothing I'm going to share with you today is brand new information. At least I don't think so. Right? It's all the same tools that we've been hearing wrapped up in a different package. What I'm hoping to share today is what has helped me is putting it together into a system and a process so that I can follow it easier. So hopefully that's what I'll help with you today. And what time, Micah, do you need me to be done?
About an hour, so.
Okay.
8 o'clock. Yeah.
Perfect. Should be enough time to ask lots of questions. So I like to leave space in my program so that you guys can ask questions and interactive, especially as we get into the process. It's like, I've got this example. Let's throw those out there. So don't be afraid to have a conversation. One of the things I want to talk about in all of this is we tend to look at much of what I'm going to talk about as soft skills. right? Everyone calls them soft skills. I call them essential skills. Because as we're moving forward, especially with our younger employees, anyone 40 and younger is expecting us to have these skills. And they're being taught these skills and they're holding us accountable to having these skills. So if we keep calling them soft skills and we don't necessarily put emphasis on us learning them or teaching our leaders and managers that we're bringing up behind us to be taught these skills, then that's where we're going to have some big gaps in maintaining that accountability. That's certainly where I run into those gaps. I'm like, oh, this is a great mechanic. Let's put him in as the lead. But then I don't teach him any of these tools to help with the soft skills, or as I like to call them, the essential skills. So keep that in mind. We can click. Not sure who's in control. I think Brenda is. So when we think of holding people accountable, we don't usually like it, and our employees don't usually like it because it's punitive, right? We think of, come to Jesus meetings. It's like where the pedal hits the road, right? Metal hits the road. I was trying to use car analogies.
Rubber hits the road.
Just thank you. Just stop me now. I tried and failed at car analogies. It's never gonna work. That's why B&B's on speed dial. And like I heard one, fix it. I don't know what happened. Go away. Just make it go away. And so why do we think punitive when we think accountability?
Always was ingrained in us. It's a blame thing maybe, or like you feel like it's taking blame.
The old school managing is holding leverage over somebody to get them to do it.
Exactly. We use it as leverage. What was that?
We always make it about money.
Oh, we do make it about money.
Yeah, that's
It could be a bad thing. Some pride involved, absolutely. We're going to talk about that as we go a few slides down. We also usually only pull it out when we're trying to correct something. Right? So we can click, Brenda. What I'm talking about is supportive accountability. We're going to talk about all the backstory that happens before something goes wrong. And if we're doing all of that, then it looks like supportive accountability. And it's not punitive. We don't only pull it out of the drawer when we have to punish someone or correct their behavior, right? So we're looking more at supportive. The biggest obstacle to supportive, and we can click, Brenda, is us. The problem exists between here and here, right? And we don't necessarily like that because really we want it to be someone else's fault, right? It wasn't me. Lives everywhere for a reason. And as leaders, what I found the most supportive is for me to model that account. So think about what happens for you. How do you react in front of your team when you make a mistake? How do you react when you fail? When you don't live up to what you said you were going to do? On my team, 100%, they all know it. They're like, Krystal, did you do this? I'm like, what, wasn't on your calendar? Every time, right? If I don't put it on my calendar, I will not remember to do it. And yet, as a lifetime AEDer, I always think I'm gonna remember, right? But that's what brings trust with my team, is that lack of accountability. I know I'm not gonna remember. I never remember. There's that one time back in like 1986 that I remember, and I'm still holding on to that and thinking I can make that happen every day. But there's 1,000 examples that I'm not. So I need to be responsible, put that on my calendar. And that's where I have to pause and say, wait, let me put that on my calendar before we move forward. You know, I'll forget. Right? And that continues to build that trust of accountability with my employees. So think about it for a second. You can use those note pages for that. Like, what do I do when I make a mistake?
Mine is, I don't write it down. If you don't see me write it down, it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's me in my calendar.
My kids know me very well.
It's always a good point. So if you need something to write it, if you don't write it down, it's not gonna happen.
That's
exactly.
why,
I've got too many things in my head going on and. Easy to write down.
And there's that one employee, like I have one, she can remember everything. I don't know how she does it. So it's all in her head. But then if she's not there, all hell breaks loose because nobody can follow up behind her, right? So that's where she's got to hold that accountability, right?
Share it. Yeah.
And share. What about when your team brings something uncomfortable to you when you've fallen down on your accountability? How do you react to that? Do you make that a comfortable environment for like, hey, boss? So yesterday, actually, one of my employees said it to me today. And I had just taught this model on how to effectively communicate. And I didn't use the model, and he literally called me on it. He's like, "Now, you said that we aren't supposed to use the word always or never. And in that one sentence to me, you used both." You're right. I apologize, right? It's not that we're perfect. I am definitely not a perfect leader and definitely not perfect at accountability. That's why I continually practice it and teach it, because it helps me be better at it. But we have to just step into it. When we mess up, own it. I talk about it, and you guys probably have this as jobs, right, with your customers. When something doesn't work, instead of saying, "Oh, well, you know, it must have been the manufacturer," or whatever, right? That's lack of accountability. But saying, "You know, we didn't check that. I really apologize. We didn't check that. Let me double check that and fix that," right? Jeremiah literally came down to my office and reset the thing. "You're right. I didn't reset that on your car. I'll be right down and I'll fix it." So that creates that wow moment or that trust factor between you and your customer, or you and your employees, when how you correct and react to that missed accountability. Because we're all, none of us want to own up to everything that we do, but the way we can do it is just through it, right? And we have to be accountable to have that trust and hold others accountable. We can click, because this is the other one that gets in the way. Click one more time for me, Brenda.
Oh,
My dang ego, every time, right? Our egos get in the way. Our pride can sometimes get in the way, right? As a leader, I don't want to admit that I did something wrong. Our employees definitely don't want to admit they did something wrong in front of the boss, especially when they're new and they're trying to prove themselves, right? That pride and that ego can get in the way of accountability. And the best way we can teach them to do it is to model it for them. So making sure that we aren't letting ego be the reason that we don't have an accountability culture. And one of the things that ego gets in the way as leaders is in delegation. So I believe wholeheartedly that my job as a leader is to develop my people. That's my number one job, because the more I develop them, the less work I have to do, for one, right? But the more they grow and are challenged, and I have better retention with them. So I know I have to develop and delegate. Now I can get, I'll just call myself out all night long, right? This is the reason why I teach this. So I will get in my way by being, well, I'm the only one that knows this. Right? Never mind, I'll just do it myself. It's faster. Right? It's faster that one time. So I literally have it on my computer screen in front of my face that says you're not the only one who knows how to do this. You're just the only one who knows how to do it right now. So if I slow down and take the time, or say, you know what, I want to show you how to do this. I'm going to do it this one time, but then we're going to schedule time for me to show you how to do it. So the next time it comes up, you're ready to do it. Right? Making sure that we're continually pushing that. But sometimes us leaders can get into our ego a little bit about being the best at the job, especially if we came up in the ranks. So my dad was a mechanic, right? I can only imagine him trying to let go of the reins and let the young pup come in and take over his business and him back away. Never happened, which is why I thought I would be retired, right? It's like never happened, because his ego got in the way. If he had to be the best mechanic, he had to be the one in the shop that knew how to do everything. Right, and that's how our ego can get in the way of not creating accountability culture. Because what happens when we continually take it on ourselves?
Hold everybody else back.
It does hold them back.
And you're doing everything.
You're creating a
You're doing
wagon wheel.
everything and you're really tired.
Wagon wheel, you're doing everything.
Wagon wheel.
You're the only, you're the point, so if you're not there, the whole thing fails.
Yep, you're the pinch point, you're the constraint. But also, your people don't feel like you trust them to learn. And if they think you don't trust them to do the job, they think you don't trust them to do other things, and the wagon wheel of accountability culture falls off. Right? So that's why that's really important. And one of the things that we can do to make sure that we're creating an accountable culture is one of the things that we call a soft skill, but I think is a hard skill, and that is boundaries. Go ahead and click, Brenda. Most of the time, we do not set up those boundaries. And this is where accountability starts, right? Outside of us modeling it and us looking at our own behavior and how we're showing up, making sure our ego stays home as much as possible, or maybe not. If you're married, I'm single, so I can just leave it hanging out in the living room, it's fine. Your partners might not like it if you bring it home, so maybe leave it in the garage. But boundaries are where we can start having that accountability conversation in a supportive way long before it becomes punitive. Okay, and boundaries, we always think about like our personal boundaries. It's like, hey, no touching, don't stand within 5 feet, COVID rules, 6 feet in every direction. Right, we think of those kind of boundaries, or we think emotional boundaries, that you hurt my feelings, that sort of thing. But boundaries can be a lot of different things. I have one more thing. Oh, I wanted to talk about the way to know that you don't have a good boundary in place. And the way to recognize when you're looking at your team, if they don't have good boundaries in place with their coworker. So have you ever been in that coworker relationship or employee-employer relationship where you feel like you're always giving and they're always taking? Boundaries being crossed. Boundary you don't know you have, or you didn't set, right? When you think that coworker is always on my nerves, right? That employee is always on my nerves. A boundary is being crossed, right? Sometimes I sadly don't notice them until I just get irritated. And I have to know that's my trigger as a leader, because should I be like, oh my gosh, you're irritated? No, probably not. It's not super effective. Hasn't worked out for me in the past. I notice it, I'm like, oh, I'm irritated. And I'm like, you know what? Give me a second. I'll be right back. I know there's a boundary being crossed and I have to go check what that is. Right? Sometimes I have the time to do that. Don't always. Right? But if you can notice it, if you get irritated, then the accountability comes in. I have to come back and say, I'm super sorry I snapped at you. I got a little irritated. Here's what was going on for me. Right? I apologize that I spoke in that tone, right? Take that accountability, opens up the conversation. If we don't ever take that accountability, it can't open the conversation to talk about boundaries. And the more we talk about what's going on with those boundaries, the better off we will. One of the things I do with my team consistently is when they say they're too busy, right? They're slammed. I want to jump in. God, I'm a great hero. I love to jump in and just start helping them. But I don't stop and ask enough questions. I then cross their boundaries because I start getting up in their business, right? When I think I'm helping. I'm not always helping in the way that looks like help to them, but feels like help to me. Right? It's like, oh, this is what I would want someone to do if I was in this position. Usually I manage making more work for everybody. Super, super fun to come back around and apologize for that too. What I need to do in that moment is stop and back up and go, what's going on here? Because sometimes my employees are also taking advantage in that moment, right? They've learned if I say I'm too busy, she'll come in and do some work for me. They don't do it consciously. Nobody's that evil. Well, most people aren't that evil. There's one or two out there. But for the most part, they do it subconsciously. They're like, some stuff will come off of my plate. My long-term employees know if I tell her I'm too busy, she's gonna mess things up and I'm gonna be busier, so I should not use that. Heather always says, "Oh, I'm so blessed today." I know that means she's too busy, but she won't say too busy because she's afraid I'll get in there. So we have set up on our team that too busy moment, like Heather uses, "I'm so blessed." And so that's my cue to slow down and go, what do you need? What does support look like to you right now? And most of the time, she's like, "I just wanted to whine about it. I'm fine." Or like in my newer employee's case, he usually says, "I don't know how to prioritize everything that's on my plate right now. Like, I have no clue how to get it all done." I'm like, "All right, so would it be helpful to you?" It's my key. Like, I still, in that moment, want to jump right in and fix it. Like, would it be helpful to you if we listed it all out and I helped you prioritize it? Yeah, that would be awesome, right? Or sometimes he's like, "No, I can do it," right? But he just needed that key to go, "Oh yeah, I need to go list it out and decide what's important." Or sometimes he'll list it out and say, "These are all the things you gave me to do. Which one is the most important to you and you need me to get done?" And I've given them permission to tell me they can't do it all. Right? And then I can get agreement from someone else to take something off of their plate, or I can step in and I'm learning, not real perfect at it, but learning to say, "Do you want me to do that?" They don't always, but like, no, that admits defeat in some cases, right? The others, they're just scared to mess it up, which I often do. We can click, Brenda. Yeah. I don't want to spend a ton of time on here, but I did want to bring it for you guys on what these look like in the shop, what they look like in your workplace. So these are the different types of boundaries that we have, right? When I think of physical boundaries in the shop, where you might notice that someone is crossing one of your boundaries or another employee's boundaries, are things like, he's touching my tools. Right? I can't find my wrench. I was a hairdresser and I remember that was the big one. Right? It's like, "She got my blow dryer." Right? So it could be tools. It could be the workspace. He always leaves the workspace dirty. Things of that nature will show that there's some kind of physical boundary that's being crossed. And that's our indicator to slow down and have a conversation about what boundary is being crossed. Saying, "What about that really bothers you?" Right? What's going on? Have you told him that you don't like it? My employees really hate it when I ask them that question. Have you had the conversation with him that you don't want him to touch my tools? "Well, no, he should know." Well, he obviously doesn't because he keeps touching your tools. Does he know they're your tools? Right? In my office, Heather has a specific chair. She's been with me the longest, so that's why I use her in examples all the time. Not that I'm calling her. But she has a specific chair at the conference table. And as the new employee, she literally waits to see if you sit in her chair so she can tell you to get out of her chair. That's a physical boundary for her. And when I learned that it was an issue for her, she wasn't doing it maliciously, right? It was like, she wasn't. It sounds like it. And that's my first place to go to. I'm like, she's being such a man, right? But when I asked her, she's like, "Well, I don't want to say anything, but then it really bothers me, so I have to." Right? So she's trying to make herself sit somewhere else and can't for the new person. I'm like, why don't you just communicate up front that that's your favorite chair and you want to sit there before they ever sit in it? She's like, "Well, that seems rude." I did. I put a place card in front of the chair for her. Heather's chair.
Remember technicians putting tape down in between their stalls and saying, "You said over that fixed spot." The communication doesn't take place in the shop.
Right, but that's communicating that physical boundary.
Yeah, tape goes striking.
Don't just wander around their shop, okay? Emotional or mental boundaries in the workplace can look like yelling, right? Yelling at each other when you get triggered, or throwing tools, my cross both. There's a hand, emotional mental boundaries. Like I said, my dad was a mechanic. I remember talking wrenches. I was trying to think of another one. Being like a condescending tone or talking down to the new employee, right? Treating them like they're stupid. Those could be some of the emotional, mental boundaries of going, hey, yeah, when you talk to me like that, I don't like it. What's coming up for you? Have those conversations. And those might have to be conversations with the leader first, because those ones get really heated quickly. Because we don't always know why we get triggered about it. We don't know why we're ticked off at them. We don't necessarily know why we're being condescending, or we're not being honest about why we're being condescending. That's usually like, oh, no, I actually did think you were stupid. Okay, my bad. I know you're not stupid. But I have to be really real about what I was thinking, and that's part of that personal accountability. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm being defensive because I was treating you like I was stupid. Just that one thing, yeah. Thank you. That makes me sound better. Spiritual or religious boundaries, right, are the boundaries that say everyone has the right to believe the way that they want to believe. And those might be boundaries, especially in the current political, social, economical climate, might have to have we have full workplace boundaries around what can be talked about at work without someone else's permission in regards to religion and politics. Right, and if you want to have one of those conversations, you have to ask, right? Are you comfortable having a religious conversation with me right now? I have some questions. No, can we get wine after work? Then I'll answer your question, right? Usually what happens.
Shouldn't that be part of the interview process?
Yeah. If I would get vote.
I do believe that's a protected class, so don't ask that question. HR, absolutely, don't ask that question. Any leading questions? I do have a few that you can ask, so talk to me later. Financial or material in the workplace. Financial and material boundaries. Sorry, I keep forgetting you guys are over there. Hi. Those can be things of like being paid on time, getting my paycheck on time and correctly every time. How is my time tracked? Like things like that could be setting up accountability ahead of time on what's supposed to happen, and when it messes up, owning it. I remember I went on a work trip and left and accidentally turned everyone to printed check instead of direct deposit, but I was not there to write a check. Oops.
You were on a safari?
I was not, but I had no way to get them printed checks. So then I had to like reverse things, zip out of my class because of course I didn't recognize it. Who recognized it? One of the employees whose direct deposit didn't show up, and now it's Friday night. So I am frantically trying to set up a business Venmo so I can Venmo money because I made a mistake. Right? And I had to apologize profusely. Do they continue to think I'm going to cross that boundary? Every time. I only did it once. But that's a scary space, right? So my team has the permission to talk to me about that. And one of them came to me and was like, that made me feel really insecure. Right? What system do you have in place to make sure you don't do that again? I'm like, that's a great question. I'm gonna make one. I don't know right now, but I promise as soon as I set one up, I'll let you know. Right? And I set up a redundancy process to make sure that could happen. Right? Now I'm scared of that. They like takes me an hour to run payroll because I check every button 14 times. Time could be one that comes up a lot, right? If you're texting them after hours, that might be crossing a boundary of their family time that they're probably not telling you about, but they're ticked off about it. Time in respecting their time, like random meetings, or the guy on staff that talks too much for too long about not anything. Nobody else has that guy, just me.
Right, I mean, when she said it. There was definitely a light concept.
I didn't read, just read the body language. Right, it's like I have the one that will go on, and if you give her attention, she'll just keep chatting. She knows it's an issue, she deals with it, but it's like. Now people, are like, hey, wow, I have stuff to do. I really want to hear what you have to say, but. I got a car to fix, but I can't just hang out and chat with you all day, right? So that could be one. Schedules, productivity, efficiency would fall under the time boundaries, right? And those are the ones that usually get triggered for us as leaders and managers. It's like they're not being efficient enough with their time, they're not being productive enough with their time. So that tells us we need a boundary around that. And then non-negotiables are our deal breakers. We tend to want to put a lot of things in the deal breaker category when we set boundaries, especially when we first start setting boundaries. But the non-negotiable category should be saved for the things that really we know we will walk, right? You're fired if this happens. So be prepared if it's in your non-negotiable category, that's when you let someone go, right? In my non-negotiable categories would be overt racism on site or sexual harassment, anything of that nature, immediate termination. Don't care why you did it, you gotta go. Attacking another employee, like physically attacking another employee, I'm sorry, you gotta go. Don't really care about your story. Right? It's like those are not.
What if there was tape involved?
So see, that's like, if there was the boundary, there's the tape. I was communicated not to cross the tape, so. So making sure those should really be about the ones that keep us completely safe and secure. Not everything can go in your non-negotiable category. That means any of those boundaries, as we're communicating with our employees in the next step, we can have a back and forth and come up with a boundary that works for both of us moving forward. Any questions on any of those? Next slide, Brenda. I forgot the word click, like I couldn't remember it. It didn't exist for me for a second. So the other thing I want to talk about in doing boundaries is giving yourself permission to set the boundaries. Often we're like, I personally can come up with excuses for my employees better than they can. Like I'm really good at it. I am such a nice person and I really want to care for them. And so I'm like, oh yeah, but I know that she's going on with this at home. And so I won't call her out on that one this time. Right, but what happens when we don't call out that one time? That starts happening. When they have that tape, right? The tape isn't perfect. I'm gonna use that example moving forward, right? It's like, I put my toe over and you didn't beat me.
Fist fight.
The next time, I'm putting a whole foot over, right? Oh, you didn't notice that? Didn't notice that? That's off, right? So they start pushing those boundaries. Anyone has kids knows this, right? You give them the toy or the chocolate or a candy bar in the store one time. You give in one time every time you go to the store, right? I don't have kids. I just watch in the grocery store. So give yourself permission to set and hold boundaries and have these conversations. Don't do it in the heat of the moment if at all possible. Right? So when I say your true feelings, sit down. Like for me, I had to realize every time I got that flash of irritation and I wanted to snap at someone, that meant my boundary was being crossed. Like, okay, I'm gonna step away, let myself calm down and explore what boundary is actually being crossed so that I know, and then I can come back with my true feelings, because that's where when we do that snap decision, I'm like, you always do this to me. You never take out the garbage. And we get into that really intense conversation. Whereas if we can back up and uncover our true feelings on it, we can set a nice clean boundary. Self-aware, 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 and communicate clearly. Brenda, click. when we talk, I love this quote because a boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. We tend to put a lot of soft, mushy feelings around it when we hear the word boundary. We're like, what are we talking about here? Why is she bringing this up with auto mechanics? Right? But it's simply about setting up what is okay in our interaction and what isn't okay in our interaction. And the clearer we are about that in the very beginning, it's why we have employee handbooks in the first place, right? Is setting those clear boundaries, but we have to consistently reinforce them as we move through our relationship. And every time we let one of those slide, like attendance is a perfect one. And it's like, oh, I can make up excuses 2 minutes late. Like, I'm 2 minutes late all the time, right? And I'll let it slide. But if I don't say, hey, I just noticed you were 2 minutes late today. Everything okay? Then they just know I noticed. But if I make the excuse for them and let it slide, how much later are they going to be next time? Right? They continue to push that boundary. So don't think of them as these, it's not even part of being more punitive. It's part of having clear communication. So I don't irritate you and you don't irritate me. Right? What's okay is what's not okay. And using that language can help train our employees to have better conversations too. Any questions about boundaries? They're like, please move on to the next thing. Click. My team's the same way. They're like, oh my God, you're talking about boundaries again. Like, well, if you would have said one, then you wouldn't be in this. I'm like, dang it. So how then do we get our team members to want to participate in an accountability culture? Right? First, we set up all of those good boundaries, making sure that we hold to them. Go back through your handbook. I do it every year. Go through the handbook. What are those things that are my non-negotiables? Are they written out clearly as non-negotiables? Right? What are the things and what's going to happen? Right? What's at risk in the relationship, employee-employer relationship, coworker relationship, customer relationship, if we don't do those? Make sure that's nice and clear. Now we need to have a conversation with our employees, right? Or if they're having accountability issues with each other, make sure they're having a conversation. The place I like to start is meeting with the employee and find out, do they know? Do they know what our mission is? Do they know what our vision is? Do they know what our values are? Do they know what our customer service policies are? Do they understand them clearly? Do they understand their role in it and how they uphold it? A lot of my problems always come back to that, right? Because it makes so much sense to me, but it's been 9 years, and let's face it, as sole proprietors, the culture of the company is really our personality, right? We can put fancy words on it, but it's really us and our management team and what we put forward. So being really clear about that and communicating it. How do they participate in it? One of ours is professionalism. So I ask them, how do you participate in professionalism? How do you show that you live the value of professionalism here? It's like, oh, I answer the phone within 3 rings, right? It can be something very simple. How do I participate in an accountability culture? Oh, I call myself out, right? And I always say I'm sorry when something happens. So having those conversations, making sure they know what their part in it is and what your expectations and boundaries, right? Boundaries, expectations, same thing. And then find out, what are theirs? This was the step I missed for a lot of years, right? I didn't ask them what their boundaries were. What are their non-negotiables? Where do they get irritated? What are your goals? Where do you want to be, right? We'll say like, where do you want to be in 5 years? But I know when I was 27, I had not a clue where we're going to be in 5 years. I couldn't even tell you 5 minutes down the road, right? They don't always have long range vision. If they did, they have your job, right? They don't. They need us to have that for them. So we've got to ask some questions, right? You know, what do you want in your life? I found out actually one of my employees wanted to own her own house. And she wanted to make more money than her husband. I'm like, done, I got you. So we put a plan in place. Sorry, don't tell him. He's thirsty. But she wanted to buy a house. I had no idea she wanted to buy a house. So then we could set up goals and ways that she could work and hold herself to get to that goal. Is she more invested than living up to the company's mission, vision, and values? She sure as heck is, right? She wants to get herself into a new house. Right, another employee, I learned they wanted to start working part-time within 5 years. I never would have guessed that. But because I kept having these conversations, because it doesn't all happen in one conversation. Tried that, they quit. Don't try to get all of it out. That's for therapy. Just little conversations over time will give you all this information. I've made a few mistakes along the way. There's a reason I'm standing here. And you'll start to put the picture together of what things are important to them. And listen for those moments when they're saying, this person does this and they irritate me with this, or you irritate me with this. Listen to those and dig into what's going on there, because now you know some expectation, some boundary is being crossed and not being met. And explore that and you'll find out what's really important to them. So now we can start helping them set their expectations and their boundaries with us, with customers, right? All of my people are salespeople, so they have to set those time boundaries with customers. It's like, you can't call me at 2 o'clock on a Sunday and ask me for 30 people tomorrow. I don't work on Sunday, right? But you have to set that up ahead of time, because if the customer's calling you on Sunday, you've always answered them. You can't just not answer them. Then that's not living up to your values and the expectations you put forward. Right, so then you can start really having those conversations with them. And I think that's where it gets really fun, right? Because you start getting somewhere different, where they're engaged and you're engaged. So I get myself back on track. Yeah, if neither side is communicating their needs, we can't have accountability, right? Because I'm sure you guys have those employees that wouldn't have a clue what their needs or expectations were. Right? I have one. He has not a clue. He's like, I'm fine, boss. I just come in and do my job. I'm like, yeah. And then I get a text from him that's like, no one will help me. I guess I'm on my own, whatever. But you said you were fine. Right? So that was the boundary. Right? You didn't want help with that. Let's backtrack, right? And have the conversation. And I always point out, this is why we have those conversations. So you don't get to this point. I don't want you going home on a Friday night and being mad all weekend when it was something we could have solved. So let's have the conversation. And those are going to have to be little bits over time, right? It doesn't happen overnight, especially with the tough nuts, right? And for that particular employee, it's pride. We have that conversation. I'm like, I'm not telling you suck at your job. Let's have a conversation on how to make your job more fun, right? How to make it more productive, how to make it a place that you're like ready to come to, right? So it's those kinds of conversations. So once you have determined you have goal alignment, click. This is my favorite little chart. And you can click, I think 3 times. Let's just get them all up there. It should say skill, hill, will. Perfect. So this, and on that handout, you can see that little grid, which we'll pull up in a second, is I start evaluating, okay, if I've got some problems in accountability and I've done all those things, right? Now I have to start doing some evaluating on what kind of coaching is needed for that situation and where I'm at. And this is one that can help me. Sometimes I start here and then I have to backtrack and go, oh, I didn't train them on that, right? Had that come up today, I was like, and you can send the Emma, and off I went. Turns out I never trained him how to send an Emma, so he had no clue. And then he messed it up, and then he was all verklempt because he messed it up, right? And embarrassed. But ultimately, it was my fault because I didn't train it. So I had to come back and say, whoops, I didn't train you. So sometimes I have to start at what's going on and backtrack on what I did and backtrack through all of that we already covered. So in skill, that's looking at how competent is the worker for that specific task. Do they know how to do a brake pad on Cadillac CTS? Right? Do I even have brake pads? I have no clue. I try to speak the lingo. I know nothing. My car would start and I opened the hood that I had a problem because you can't see anything in there. You guys know what I'm talking about. Where is my battery? In the trunk?
Under the back seat.
But there's these two things that don't look like batteries under the hood. Yeah, I have no clue. So skill, I am not competent to deduce if it's my battery or my starter. Not competent. I do not have the skill for this job. Right? So determining, does my employee have the skill for the job? And some of our new employees may not have the skill for the job. They might need some more training and coaching on that, especially in this kind of market where you guys are probably bringing in really green mechanics because there's not enough mechanics in the world. So they really don't know, but we've got to teach them the skill. Is it a hill, right? The hill is something that's outside of them. It's external. It's something in the office, in the work environment. A pandemic would be an example of a hill. Okay, we can't overcome that. It lives out there. What can we control of that, or what can't we control of that? In my job, like a hill right now would be the construction industry is going down, 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 and it's about 30% of my business. They are. I know it doesn't feel like it, does it? They're down about 20% and projected to go down to 30%. Right, because interest rates are going up, so people aren't purchasing the homes, so they don't need the remodels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're hand in hand at the moment. I'm like, okay, where are all of our construction workers going to go to work? And because we know it's going to come right back as soon as that interest rate goes down, right? So, but we want to retain them all. What jobs can we put them in right now that will then go down about the time construction comes up? That's a hill. Right? It's not something the employee's doing, but it's something we got to figure out to help them be able to do their job. And sometimes that gets in their way. They don't know how to do it. And they don't want to say they don't know how to do it. Right? They don't know how to do that kind of strategic thinking to figure out what am I going to do? I'm just down 30% or whatever, right? They don't necessarily know to ask. So when we're having these conversations, that helps us uncover that and where we can come in with our skill set. The will is how motivated they are to do that task. Do they even want to do it? Right? And I actually asked, are you willing? I've gotten no's. No, not willing. Okay. What about that? And we have to back up, start the conversation over. We're talking about something different now. Right? I was gonna say, like what is keeping them from doing it? What's keeping them from feeling engaged in it? Why aren't they excited about it? And sometimes it's a problem, and I will do this as a leader. I start going, okay, it's a will issue, so I got to get them motivated. I got to get them re-engaged, but I'm doing it on the wrong thing because I didn't ask enough questions back here when it came up to find out what is it that's not motivating them. I do it to Heather all the time because her and my brain thinks so differently, and I'll go solve this problem over here. But she's still not engaged, and it makes no sense to me. That should have worked. But if I come back and ask a question, she's like, oh no, I didn't want to do it because I felt like I was bothering him. Wait, what? Right? So our brains don't necessarily line up. So if we ask those questions, we don't waste time solving a problem. Right? I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, of course. Right? So let's click to the next one. And that'll show the chart. Perfect. So when you look at this one and you're looking at skills 1 to 10 on the bottom, 10 be they have all the skill in the world, and attitude 10 be they're completely motivated, right? So we've got up here all with totally motivated, but low skill up in the blue training box, right? That indicates we probably have a great candidate for some coaching, some more training, maybe connecting them with a senior member on the team to do some mentoring and side by side to help them get the skills that they need. Because they're motivated, they want to be here, they're willing, but they just don't quite have all the skills, right? If we come over to environment, which means we have high motivation and high skill, those are our high performers, right? Those are our people that are up there, they're doing the job, they got it, but something's external is in their way. What is it? So then we can start asking questions, figure out what is it that's in the way. Oh, you just didn't have the right tool for the job and that's why it wasn't working? Oh, let me call the guy in Napa and have him deliver that. He'll be here in 20, right? And we can get the job done. So it could be something environment. And once you start using this, your team recognizes that it's environment and they come to you immediately. It's getting frustrated. And then when we come down to motivation, motivation says that we have low motivation, low attitude, right? Poor attitude, but we've got all the skills. So we know how to do the job. We're just not necessarily willing to do the job. So what's going on there? Are they challenged enough? I find this happens a lot with our more senior members. They've been with us for a while. Maybe they're not feeling challenged, right? So what do they need to feel challenged to get re-engaged? Maybe they're just really tired of working on Krystal's Cadillac, right? Like, maybe could you give the Cadillac to someone else and just let me work on something else, right? You know, whatever it is, it's like they're not engaged. So we can ask some questions. What are they not excited about? So let's get into the, like, what are you not excited about? What's really giving you that pit in your stomach right now? Tell me what's going on there. Because I know you got the skill for this, right? And then in our terminate box, doesn't mean we have to terminate them just because they fall into that box. Let's do a few things first, right? Could be our new employees, right? They have low skill, low motivation because they're scared. They don't want to come ask for help. They don't have, like, have one right now. He doesn't quite have the skills. He's never done recruiting before. And I tell him 100 times that I know and don't expect him to have this knowledge, but he expects him to have this knowledge. And because we had this conversation, I know when he hits that wall, because he expects him to have the knowledge. And I just ask, like, what is it you're expecting yourself to know how to do right? It's like, well, I should just be able to do this by myself. Yeah, but this is a different variable. I get it. Okay, so that doesn't mean I have to terminate him, but I have to do a little bit different digging and coaching. If it's a longer term employee and they've lost their motivation and they don't have the skills, like I think in your guys' industry, opening a car hood and not even be able to tell I have an engine would be a skill issue for me. I used to change my own oil. I used to know what cars did, but not anymore. I've lost the skill. So are some of our older mechanics losing the skill to work on new computers or new, can we get them that training to get their skill up? And that might get their motivation up, right? Because now they feel like they're contributing again. They might feel like they're not contributing. I'm trying to think of something else, but I'm just gonna make bad car analogies, so I'll just move right on.
I'll stop now.
Fair. So if you've exhausted everything and you've asked, are you willing? Right? There's this training, I could send you to this. There's this conference, I could send you there. I can team you up with this senior member. Are you willing? And they say no, then that's when we know it's time to part ways. And I usually ask the question. Can't tell, I'm fairly direct. So, like, okay, if you're not willing to do those things, are you willing to not work here? Like, is that the choice that we're making? Yeah, I think it is. Okay, well, let's figure out how to make that, right? Let's make that a clean, right? Amicable break as possible, right? So then they're not walking off the job one day because we didn't have all those conversations, right? And sometimes they'll tell me yes, they want it. Right, they're willing, but I know they're not. I can call their bluff, don't always, but it depends on the situation, it depends on your relationship with your team. I usually step away at that time and then make the decision, like if I fired him today, how do I feel about that? Yeah, I actually feel more relaxed when I think about that, that's what I'm gonna do, right? Or no, that causes me more stress. It's okay, it's not the right choice to make, right? Any questions on that? Probably the newest piece for you. Yeah. Ooh, perfect. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So putting it all together and making your plan, starting with the self-awareness. Where are you at? What are you doing as a leader to be accountable and to model accountable behavior and allow your team to participate in that accountability culture? What do you accept? What clear boundaries have you set? What have you not set? And make a plan to set those. Goal alignment, have those conversations with your employees and get aligned. What do they want? What are their boundaries? Make sure they understand what yours are and what your expectations are. And then you can move forward on goal alignment. Reset some boundaries if there weren't any. Usually that conversation for me reveals a spot where I didn't set one or they didn't set one, or we need to set one with a customer or another employee, something like that. So reset those. Double check your skill, will, hill matrix and verify where you're at and that you're on the right track and are coaching them appropriately to where they're at. And then rinse and repeat. I think the most frustrating thing about accountability is that it never stops. You can't just fix it like a starter and then Krystal Star works, right? I wish I could have that one conversation with each employee and then we stay on that track for the rest of our lives. Dear Lord in heaven, do I wish it worked that way. And I think that is the most defeating part as a leader in accountability, is that it's constant and we have to be creative with it constantly. And we have to come up with different ways to ask the questions and different ways to have the conversation. One employee you might need to take out for a beer, another one you might have to take for a spa day, another one you might have to sit across the desk.
Take out that.
Yeah. Or cross the boundary. Right? So they're all going to be different. There's no one size fits all. There's no perfect formula that we can use for it all the time. And I think that's what gets so heavy as a leader. So the thing that I would leave you with as leaders is just recognize that. Like when you start to feel just buried by it, recognize this is what it is. It doesn't mean you suck. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be leading people. I have to have this pep talk with myself all the time. Might have had it today. Yeah. I'm like, doesn't mean I'm not a good business owner. Doesn't mean I don't know how to lead my team. It just means I missed a step or they've changed their mind and I got to go figure it out. Right. And for me, it's that act of doing the same thing over and over that feels like insanity, but is creating an accountability culture. Wish I had better news for you. I feel like you could have started there and passed out beer. Thanks. So that's it. That's what I got for you. If you have any questions or any scenarios you want to go through, my info is on the slideshow. My cards are somewhere around there. They're on the handouts. You can find me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When I finally retire, does that mean I get an honorary degree in psychology?
Definitely. God's yes.
Probably go online and Google it and type it up for you.
Yeah, and if you're helping people meet their goal of up to retire in 5 years, you have a position that can match that.
Definitely. Thank you for inviting me in and the tacos smell lovely.
They're so hot.
There's plenty.
And oh, I forgot one thing. I'll pass this out as well. This is a great piece that corporate just created this year. that helps me stay on track with my accountability and the action plans, because that's where I fall down, ADHD. Is in tracking what in the world we talked about in that last conversation. So these, I just keep it, I just keep these in their employee file, and then I can look at it right before we meet and remind myself what in the world we're working. But they did a really good job creating that template, so definitely use that. All right.
Does anybody on Zoom have any questions?
Krystal, can you share, is that document, the project accountability template?
Yeah,
Perfect. So all of you guys on Zoom also got these, they're in the chat. And I know personally, I would like to thank Krystal for a great presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Very well done.
my pleasure. Thank you.
One thing I was gonna add, I was reading something this morning and it was. Every Tuesday is email, and I put it on our Facebook page, but it's about communicating, when you do communicate with employees, they had us follow up with an email explaining what you went covered, what everything else. It creates to have something they're looking at, and there's no misinterpretation of anything you're communicating.
That's a great point, because you usually find where you didn't communicate when you send that email. Right?
Yeah. So,
Like, wait, that's what you wanted me to do? Oh,
and Krystal, thank you, appreciate it. So,
pleasure.
Bob, do you have anything to? Bring up? No.
I'm so thankful.
Okay, that's good. So does anybody have something they want to share, a tip or anything for the group?
I got a little tech tip. I don't know how many of you guys work on European diesels. We've been seeing a lot more of them lately, and had one a few weeks ago that had probably 20 codes in it. Actually, it was Mika's sister-in-law's car. If you get a bunch of codes and you have any exhaust gas temperature sensor codes in there, always fix that code first. There's four of them on those things, 4 exhaust gas temperature sensor. If any of those go bad, you'll get turbo codes, you'll get a whole slew of emissions type codes. So just throwing that out there. I just,
Do the exhaust.
I thought, man, I could have really spent a ton of time trying to fix this thing and diagnosing all these codes. And you know, a lot of times I'll just write all the codes down, clear them all, and then see what comes back. But in this case, I just thought, man, I bet that one of those sensors is bad. It could literally cause all these codes. So I fixed one sensor and fixed, 20 codes.
And Chris ran that too.
Yeah. What's that?
Condition.
What was out of whack when you set the code? So that's it.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, anybody else? If not, I have next month, we have Fred White was gonna be here in person to talk about goals. And I wrote something up here, it says goal. Actually, to be honest with you, I didn't write it all out. I used Chat GPT to write something. That was something that in Chat GPT, I put something on the Facebook page about that. It was absolutely amazing what it does. I was surprised.
I've tested it. I ask it HR questions and it's like outline like. Oh, you're
I
great.
had it writing policies and procedures for automotive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it just spits them out.
Yeah.
It's
It's
great.
amazing. I've been playing with it.
Pretty fun.
What's
What was
that?
that, what was that called, Micah?
Chat GPT.
Feel like I have a long rabbit hole to dig in.
You may want to check out the connection with Bard, B-A-R-D. It was highlighted on 60 Minute last night, and it was really quite exceptional. If you hadn't seen it, it's on Google, and Bard is an alternative to the Microsoft AI. It's pretty cool.
Get ready.
Yeah. It's a great.
He was working at a desk office.
Yeah. But it was really interesting as far as the, like I had to write a procedure on replacing a timing belt. And it pretty much, I was able to take that and deleted a few things, tweaked a few things, but copy and paste it to the work order. And it explained, you added instant value to the work order. It was like, man, this is sweet. I don't have to type it all. So. That was
Actually, I had a customer who, they were diagnosing his car, and he used ChatGPT, put the code in, and told him what potential fault was, what the sensor was, and a potential price.
Yeah.
And so then he was like, this, you guys are charging too much. I'm like, "Well, come on, man. Get in there. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's very, because then he's like, can you pop the hood, show me where it's at? I popped the hood, like, I don't know, man. I don't see it like a fuel level sensor, a fuel sensor on the Chevy. I legit don't see it. Good luck.
Hold the computer up closer to the.
I think- So,